Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
Hey y'all, this is MC from MC Anime. We got another guest with us today, JV. How are you doing today?
I'm well, sir. How about yourself? Thank you very much for having me on.
I'm hanging in there, can't complain. So tell the audience a little about yourself, what you do, or where they can find you.
Yeah, sure. So my name is J.R.R, Hillard, or you can call me Joe, and I am a fantasy adventure author. So if you enjoy things like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or Dungeons and Dragons, my novels are called the Realm of Warminster, and they combine epic fantasy that you might find in, classical fantasy like what Tolkien writes, with a little bit of a gothic spin. So you get a little dark fantasy in there too. So I like incorporating, myths and legends of monsters that you might see, or you might be able to recognize a little bit with my own personal spin on them as part of it. So it's a 4-book series. The last of the 4 comes out here in April of 2024, and that will complete the first series. And then I've got a couple of spin-offs, some of the more popular characters that are coming out later in the year.
All right. So that's a little bit about Joe. Where can they find you?
Sure, I'm easy to find. So if you JV Hillard, HILLIARD.com, you'll come to my website. You can also find my books at dragonmoonpress.com or anywhere you look for books, really. So if you'd like, you're an Amazon user all the way to iTunes, or you like audiobooks, you can find me on Audible or other platforms that provide ebooks, audiobooks, or you can get hardbacks and paperbacks from our site.
All right. Without further ado, today's episode is actually going to be AR, the Realm of Warminster. So, JV or Joe is going to talk about his adventure going to AR/VR and the gaming world, how it applied to his world, and the books he wrote in fantasy, inspired by Tolkien.
Yeah, sure. So let me tell you a little bit about that journey. I wrote a book, and I was contacted after my first novel by a video game company that loved the graphic nature of it and thought it might be really cool to turn into an augmented reality and virtual reality video game. And over the last year or so, I've licensed my intellectual property to them for the first series to create that. And the idea behind it will be one of the first melded games. The company that's doing it is a company called Melderverse. And what Melderverse does is it takes real world, instead of just having in-game currency, so your character finds gold and experience and levels up, you also find things that are redeemable in the real world. So if you slay the dragon and you're able to complete the quest, you also, when you open the chest, you get stuff that you can use in game, but then you can also take e-coupons that you've earned from that to a Subway and get a free Coke, or take it to a Starbucks and get a half off, or buy one get one of our sponsors. So the AR version of that is going to come out later this year, and then the virtual reality version of that will come out in 2025.
All right. So that came out to be something you really like. How do you explain that to people, given what actually has been part of everything you've done?
Yeah, so it was serendipitous, I would describe it as. And the CEO there fell in love with the series, reached out to me and said that they were creating a new property and wanted to head down this path. And I've actually introduced them to a few other authors that I worked with that might want to turn their games or their books into video games. And as part of it, we sat down and talked about making sure that the story was, a part of the adventure that you would find as a gamer, but also understanding that not everything you have in the book is translatable to game. And so some of that stuff went into a storyboarding process where I was, able to help people understand who the characters were, what the plot was, what the monsters were, the goals of those characters, and then ultimately, work with his team to develop a storyline that was acceptable to my brand as well as acceptable to what they were building in terms of a game. And I would liken what they're building in this first round, this augmented reality round, very similar to what Pokemon Go was. So instead of you catching a Pokemon Go on your phone, instead you'll be able to find AR items and play not only on your computer, but on your phone, and fight the dragons or fight the villains and the big bad evil guys, and then be able to take from that and use that stuff to level up or trade for other folks in the game for other things that you might not have gotten, or in some cases redeem them in the real world, as I mentioned before. And so his company Melderverse has teamed with Niantic, which is the company that owns Pokemon Go, for engineering support and other things as we try to do this. And and then as we finish the AR piece, we're moving concurrently into creating a game in the virtual reality world, which is still about a year and change, almost 2 years away. So it's a little bit farther down the road than obviously the AR pieces. And I think everybody's been familiar with Pokemon Go for the last decade almost. And we've all played it, or at least seen it played, and we know what it is. And so it's not going to be hard to learn how to do on this game. But there's going to be parts of the game you just play on your computer, parts of the game you can play on your phone, and then eventually parts of the game that you're going to be able to play with your VR headset. But for right now, we're focusing on the AR piece.
So the augmented reality aspect of the game, how would you describe your book coming to life in the game?
So I would describe it as exhilarating. It's fun to see things when you're writing something. I could take 3 sentences or 3 pages to describe a scene or just describe a character if I want to. When you're translating that to something that's now visual instead of imaginary, and instead of me imagining it, I'm seeing it on my TV screen or my computer screen or my phone, it's different. So like I'm taking stuff that's out of my head and rolling it into animation or video content that's now going to be used as part of the gaming experience. And guess what? My plot is going to differ from your plot as a gamer. You might choose to go down path 1, where my story should take you down path 6. So there's a lot of different things and variables you have to consider as part of the creation of that game. And then ultimately understand that you're not going to get everything that's in the book in the game, right? So there are things you got to have to let go. And, I've learned over the years that in most cases, let people that know what they're doing do what they do, and if you can't do it for yourself, let them do it for you. And I've given them a wide berth. I've allowed them to, change things as they need them while staying consistent, at least with the parameters of the game. So I look at myself as kind of an offensive coordinator, to use a football term. I'm not the players on the field on this one like I was when I'm the writer. I'm not even the coach. That's the guy who's running the company over there that's building the game. But I'm calling in the plays. I'm kind of creating the scheme and I'm installing the offense, right? Like I'm there saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how this works. But you guys are playing that game and you're going to create it. They're the ones writing code. I'm not. I'm just there telling them what to write into the code to make sure it stays consistent with the book. So when you read the books, you can follow the game and vice versa to a point, to a reasonable point. And there's going to be things that happen in the game you won't even find in the books, which is kind of fun. And that's why I used the term exhilarating before. It's kind of fun for a guy like me who's always, I've been on the sideline in this process, but it's fun to watch someone else take my art and turn it into a new medium, in this case, a video game.
Oh, okay. So what's exclusive to the game the book might not have?
So, the game has the, obviously, in the book, you're seeing through the eyes of the characters and you have no control over them, right? They're just taking you through the plot and their own story arcs. And then in certain places in the book, they intersect. in the game, you have entire freedom to do what you want to do. So your characters can meet some of my main characters in the books and challenge them to fights, or fight alongside of them to conquer a certain evil or to complete a quest as part of the game. Secondly, the game is going to allow you to level up and trade with other players. So, Meldiverse is creating this melded, reality gaming platform. It would be, if you've ever read Ready Player One or watched the movie, it's maybe the first itty bitty step towards creating an oasis. But it allows you to come in and, let's say you completed quest 1 and I completed quest 2, and our characters meet in the game. I can trade you stuff. I can sell you stuff. There are also skills that you can get by spending time with people that own property in the game, that are building their castles in the game, that have become royalty in the game, and they can trade you. They can, you could become a baker, you could become a smithy, you could become things that in my world you could never be. I mean, you're just along for the ride, and I'm storytelling to you. You're a good listener, and you're being told a story when you read my book. Here, you're playing it, and you could take it in any direction you want. And so you could start from the end of my books and work your way back. You don't even have to follow the plot line of the book. You can go and do other things, but there are options for quests that you can do that will lead you and your characters to level up, become more powerful, and of course, reward you in the real world with some of those redeemable e-coupons I mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay. So you said you were inspired by Tolkien. What aspects did you take from him into your series when you first made, and also playing the game?
Yeah, sure. So Tolkien is the granddaddy of them all when it comes to fantasy adventure, right? He was the first, and he's the biggest and baddest, right? He's created Middle-earth, and with that, he wrote his own language, and with that, he created thousands of years of history that you could read in separate books outside of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and follow along and be immersed in the world that he built. And I think that any fantasy adventure author steps into that same framework is following in his footsteps. I mean, he carved the path for us. Now, we can't write our stuff in Middle-earth. That would be fan fiction. Instead, I created my own world, which is the world of the Realm of Warminster, right? And so in Warminster, I had to follow and do the same kind of thing. So I created my own magic system. I created my own currency. I created my own nobility. I've created my own coats of arms and sigils for each of the houses of royalty. I've created a map where you can go to my website and download it and check out where the places are that you're reading about in the book. And that way you feel it's immersed. And a lot of that really came from my playing days from Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like D&D, as any good nerd that's played the game, falls in love with. I mean, you're creating this world in your head, and a lot of those adventures and campaigns that you go on are translatable into good storytelling, right? If you have a good dungeon master, they're telling you a story and you're playing along. This isn't much different. It's almost like chronicling what some of our old characters did, because those stories were really good and battle tested and stuff. So I took some of that and put that in there. But again, without Tolkien, there wouldn't be Dungeons and Dragons, right? So what Gygax and his team did in the early 70s with the creation of the game was really following along the lines of very popular myths. And in the early parts of the game, you could play in a Roman world or a Greek world or a Norse world or a Native American world, or the realm of Greyhawk, right, which they had created on their own. So their Middle-earth was Greyhawk, and then it became Forgotten Realms, and it's onto a bunch of others since then, and now we're on to edition 5 of the game. And so for me, that's how Tolkien inspired me, and that's the kind of ways that I followed in his footsteps, but I gave it my own personal spin. And what I like about it is that a lot of my personal spin is really dark, right? And I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, and I think in the past, if you read Tolkien, or what I would describe as classical fantasy, bad things happen, but the good guys have a tendency to win. They don't all survive, but they have a tendency to win. And they tell a story of ideology that moves the needle forward. And Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and others like him, there was a basis of even some Christianity in it that you could see through some of the characters. Like there was a Christ-like character in Frodo that was willing to sacrifice his life for the sake of the realm, and C.S. Lewis had the lion that was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of the realm. And so they used Christian mythos and buried those within their realm. I created my own pantheon of gods, right? And there's a god of war, there's the god of healing, there's a god of good fortune. And I've borrowed from other realms and inspiration that I've taken from traditional stuff and then created my own. But Game of Thrones and the new way that folks see fantasies is really more of a dark fantasy. Like, there are great characters like Ned Stark in the first book of Game of Thrones, who you cheer for, but he loses. The good guys don't always win. And so that has a way to find itself into my books as well. So that's how I've taken inspiration from Tolkien, but also given it my own touch and my own flair. So it's epic dark fantasy as you spin through that. So good guys don't always win, bad guys don't always lose, but in the end it's a classic harrowing adventure that kind of pulls you through. And then the second part of your question about the game is that happens, right? We all have played video games throughout our lives, and you win and you lose, right? And sometimes you lose, you're done, you got to start over. Other times you can save, and start over where you left and respawn and all the kind of stuff that you do. And in the game, the same thing's going to be able to transpire, right? You're going to create your character. They can live or die. Every time you go into the game, something new is going to happen. I don't want to describe it as unplanned, because it is planned. It's very structured, but ultimately you're able to do things and to make choices that don't exist in my realm. Like that, you can make a character that's completely antithetical to the heroes and fights them in my game, as opposed to helping them in the game or being part of your own quest and they're helping you with your quest and stuff like that. It's just it's a really cool twist. And it's not just like, hey, I took my game, here's a story, and then you're going to play my story and you know what's going to happen. This is absolutely opposite of that. It has its own spin. It's like creating your own adventure every time you play it.
Okay. So that D&D aspect with the player, what was the implications in the game that you took maybe some elements to put in?
Sure. So, Dungeons and Dragons, I can't touch the stuff that they've got. That's their own property, right? And so, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, they own that stuff. So you will not see a fireball spell. You're not going to see a character that is, completely along the lines of the stuff that they've created, just because I have to stay away from that. In the same way, I won't describe my world as Middle Earth or Westeros or Greyhawk. I mean, it's none of that stuff. I created Warminster, so I'm in my own realm, right? But you borrow things from tropes that exist that fantasy readers and D&D players and other role players and cosplayers, they can all agree with, right? They're like, all right, I get the rubric that you've created here. There's a magic system, and these are the rules of your realm. Here's the currency, and that's how that works. Here is the religions, and that's how I have to play within those confines, because when I'm in certain areas of the world, in your realm, there are implications from doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And so, what I did was, over the years of playing the game, there were aspects of it that I really enjoyed and aspects of it that I thought could be improved, and I took all the things that I liked and put it in the game, but they're familiar. So by way of example, I don't have a halfling. I don't have a hobbit. I've got something called a Huldrefolk, which is true life myths that I've taken from Scandinavian lore and stood up these characters. So instead of, the kind of pudgy hobbit that's the thief, or the halfling character that you find in, the D&D games, these halflings are barbaric berserkers. And, they ride war dogs, and they're called Huldrefolk because I borrowed them from real life. You can research them all you want and find them, and they came from Scandinavian lore, which is where Tolkien got hobbits from, and halflings came from D&D. Or dwarves don't exist in my realm. There are dwarf-like creatures that do mining and forging. They're called twergs, and they have tails, and they might act similar to dwarves, and you would see the connectivity if you look deep enough. But there are humans, and there are different types of elves. I've got vermilion elves that have red eyes and red hair and alabaster skin, and they work in a caste system very similar to like India, in the sense that, the vermilion might be at the top of that caste, and the other elves worship those at the top. And that way I own Cascadian elves and Emerald, the Dale elves, and the other elves, the Raven elves that are in there, but people are familiar with the elven trope because you've seen it from Tolkien to D&D on down. And so for me, borrowing against that, but creating my own, giving my own spin, was important to me. And then, of course, all the religions are new. All of the magic is new. And the realm, of course, is new. But again, it's based on sort of medieval times with a little bit of sci-fi. What I've done is I've created a city called Abacus, which is a scholar city. And every now and then there's a device or something that's created there that advances. So one thing I had that's a pet peeve of mine is, you'll look at, Tolkien, for example, and those guys have been at it for thousands of years and they're still using swords and shields and horses. Or Game of Thrones, Jon Snow was the 999th Watcher on the Wall or whatever it was, and he's still using a sword and a shield. Well, Abacus creates new technologies through the use of magic, and they do certain things, and they come in handy for both the villains and the heroes in the game every now and then. And I think that satisfies a little bit of that for my sci-fi fans that read my epic fantasy stuff. It gives them something to look forward to. And I would put that into D&D terms as sort of like an artificer, like a character that is a tinkerer that can create things with a bit of, insight and a bit of magic, and it makes it fun and it makes it different, and therefore it makes it my own.
Oh, okay. So through the magic system itself, what is the organization? Like, what elements you actually use to create it broadcasting?
Yeah, so it starts at the baseline of 3 different types of magic. There's a divine magic that comes when the gods interfere with the humans. They live in a place called the Hall of the Ancients, and it's very similar to an Olympus or a Valhalla. And they come back and they can take human form, very similar to what you'd find in Greek and Roman myths, or they can also imbue humans with things, almost their avatar of themselves, by doing that. So you'll find, characters that are God touched in a way. And in fact, one of the main characters is God touched. He's blind at birth, but he's touched by a wandering mage one day that just so happens to be the avatar of a god, and it gives him this sight, but the sight also allows him to see the future when he sleeps. And as part of that, he's sort of like a modern day Edgar Casey spun into this character, and he's there to see, the big bad evil guy coming back to take revenge on the realm. And it's using that vision and that his that divine magic that he's able to help the realm and fight this epic struggle against the return of this evil guy. The second part of it is like I would liken it to a D&D sorcery, where it's a wild magic. It's a magic that's imbued in certain people, that everybody has just a little tinge of magic in them, but most people don't even know it and can't use it. This is stuff that's invoked through emotion and fear, and it's stuff that you can learn to harness over the years, but it's not learned. It's not wizardly, which is the third part of the magic, which is really standard in almost every fantasy realm, which is a wizard that goes and learns by reading and learns by, trials by fire and finding magic items and crafting those things. And I think it's a combination of all 3 of those that I've used to create, characters that are God touched, that have this divinity related magic that allows them to heal or allows them to see the future in some cases. In other cases, it's really to be, war priests or war wizards, where they're fighting. I have big naval battles in my novels where they're using, gusts of wind to blow the sails, and or these fingers of fire and ice to destroy ships that they're fighting and things like that. And then others that just have this sort of natural magic, almost like a fey magic that comes to them as part of that. And one of the main characters, Ritter, has the ability to connect with a falcon that he uses to hunt, and then eventually uses to save the party from time to time, and things like that too. So there's all sorts of different ways it touches. Not everybody has access to it, but those that do, if they can learn to harness it or channel it right, that helps them in their quest for to save the realm.
Oh, okay. So is that a system to combat against magic in a way for people that don't have it, to maybe equal the playing field a little bit?
Yeah. So, obviously, numbers matter, right? And, a wizard might not be able to stand up against 3 fighters, right? They might be able to take one down. And that's the simple answer to your question. But there are other answers too. I mean, you could pray for divine intervention, and the characters there do that. And it's a way of combating something that they won't be able to do. Or the realm of, the city of Abacus that creates these advanced items, you can use them. So by way of example, one of the things that they've created was this fisher's hook, which is like my version of a tractor beam. And one ship shoots this hook that's tied to rope that's laced in like a metal cord, and it reaches out and smashes into another vessel and then tugs it in towards them, and things like that, so that they can't escape. And it's a way for you to use technology to defeat magic. Or in some cases, I've created these things called granati, which is similar to what you'll find in medieval times, which are like these ceramic bowls that have caltrops in them. And when you throw them with this powder, they explode and blast out kind of like a grenade, casting these caltrops into, and that's not magical, but some folks perceive it as magic. Well, meanwhile, it's just a powder that's mixed with metal that turns into shrapnel when you throw these ceramic grenades. Or lastly, one of the things that, I've added into the realm is cryptids. Like there are these monsters, most of which I've found inspiration from real life monsters and put a twist on them, that are immune to magics or immune to certain things. So wizards are completely useless against them, and stuff like that. So there are a variety of ways that I've woven ways to neutralize, negate, or defeat magic by using things that are non-magical.
So in the religion setup, is it polytheistic or monotheistic?
Oh, it's polytheistic for sure. There's a pantheon of gods. It's very similar to like Nordic myths or Greek myths, or even Native American myths, some Indian myths, where you're getting a dozen, 24 gods, and then you also have gods that I call ancients. I don't call them gods in my novel. They're called the ancients because they've moved on. They've chosen to leave the realm and enter the hall of the ancients, which is the heavens, for lack of a better term. And they look to the heavens, the skies at night, for where they live, and they perceive the stars as their gods in the same way that many cultures in our real life did back in the day. The long and short of it is, those gods also, there are specific gods for specific races. So Malexis is the goddess or the ancient of the elves, all elven creatures. There's the god of war in Kos, who is very similar to Ares or Mars in that respect, or even takes on sort of a Thor-like component to him. Or Nothos, who is the god of good fortune, and he's kind of like a friendly Loki in the sense where you can roll the dice, and if you pray to him and make the right sacrifice, he might help you or he might not, depending on how Loki's dice roll, and things like that. So those kind of things I had a lot of fun with, but I needed to make sure that I wanted to make it ancient, and I thought that having a realm that only would have one deity would kind of be limiting. In this way, as you traveled around the realm, certain deities had greater influence, and some were ubiquitous. They were found everywhere. And so it was just, that way I can, as I built it, I could have areas that were like one of the villains in the novel, or is like this cult called the Moor Bog, and the Moor Bog worship cryptids. Literally, their gods are monsters, and they worship them by controlling them and breeding them and using them to fight whenever they go out. In the same way our cultures would have used war dogs or carrier pigeons and things like that. Well, these guys use manticore, and they and other creatures that they've bred. I've got this this like sort of changeling kind of creature that they worship, and in return for their worship, these creatures do deeds for them and stuff like that too. That's so they're not even really worshiping a god or an ancient in my case. They're really worshiping living creatures that have a shelf life. They're gonna die at some point, but they worship that. So there's you find that, I think, around the world too, here in real life. And so I wanted to make sure that that was a real part of my realm as well.
Okay. So with the setup of your world, what is the chronological timeline that is set up? What is the following events that the story follows?
Sure. So my story drops you into the realm of Warminster. And Warminster was an ancient wizard whose name had carried over it means basically all of the realm. But my story starts out in a part of the realm known as the Seven Baronies. And so the Throne Helm, which is the capital city of Warminster, is where you start out, and you see stuff starting to fall apart from the prologue out. There is a civil war that is brewing between the king and one of his barons who thinks he should be king. And the baron aligns himself with a handful of others, kind of like an axis of evil, to overthrow the king and to take the throne himself. And that's really where this thing heads off. But you don't see that right away. You see that toward the end of book one. Really, what you see right out of the jump is the return of the true archvillain, a man named Grey Taurus, who was cursed by his own god, and his eyes were taken away. He used to be a prophet, and he used this relic called the Tome of Enlightenment to see his own future. And we, at this time, when you're reading it, you don't know why he did it, but his god punishes him, and in this curse, not only does he take away his prophetic vision, he takes away his real vision, and his eyes sockets bleed slowly for the rest of his life until he can atone for his curse. And he knows of only one way to atone, and we don't know that as the reader, of course. And he aligns with this baron, and it's how they start this entire civil war for the sake of the baron's greed to steal the crown, and Grey Taurus's desire to end his curse. And you have to kind of follow along all four books to see that culminate somewhere.
Oh, okay. So the chronological timelines, basically the events that it's the lore of the game, and that lore, the game follows it to a degree if people decide to do the plot.
That's right. So you could follow, this will be happening around you as you're gaming, but ultimately you don't have to follow the plot of the book. You can make up your own quest. You can make up your own sidebars. You can develop your character any way you want. There's not necessarily classes that you have to choose from, right? You just gain skills as you go. And that's a little different than some games that like shoehorn you into picking a class, like a Dungeons and Dragons.
So the melded aspect of the game, what was your appreciation for that?
Yeah, so that really came from the idea of, I think, next generation gaming. We see a lot of that now with sponsorship ads within games. So if you've ever played Madden or NHL, or any of those games, the equipment that they use and the stuff they use in games are sponsored by those companies, right? And it's in game, and you see it as part of the game. We wanted to take it to the next level. What Meldiverse is doing is allowing you to take these e-coupons or NFTs, for lack of a better term, out of the game once you've earned them, and use them in real life, hence melding real life with your virtual and augmented reality play. And so you become your character in real life, and you can go and redeem these. It could be as simple as a QR code. It could be even more complex than that. It could be something that's a tradable token or in-game currency that you can trade to other players to use or redeem in the real world. So let's say you earn something that you're never going to use. You don't drink coffee. You're not going to go into a Starbucks. You could trade that to another player in-game in return for something that you can redeem at Dick's Sporting Goods, for a place where you are, GameStop. You're going there and use that. Those are the things that bleed out. So you can literally earn stuff in real life that you can use as real life currency versus in-game currency that can only be spent in the course of your quests and things like that. And they're all tradable, buyable. You can meet people and do that. And that's where I think that melding comes in, where someone halfway across the world, did quest 1 and they now can trade you for something you did in Quest 6, and those items are transferred to you in that way, and it's not like you have to kill somebody to take their stuff. You can trade it. There's a marketplace for that, which is sellable for both in-game currency, and then the out-of-game currency is just these redeemable NFTs, these coupons that you can put in your e-wallet and take to wherever you need to go to redeem them. And there'll be, hopefully, several dozen sponsors that will play and that you can use and tap into. Now, ultimately, too, there are going to be other games within the Melderverse universe that are not related to fantasy adventure. But if I wanted to take my fantasy adventure character into a sci-fi world or into a racing world, I'll be able to do that and meet up in this marketplace, and my character can earn experience and other things in other parts of the gaming experience within the Melderverse universe, right? And I think that's cool too, and that's what Jay and his company is building toward.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting aspect that we don't usually see. So the advantage is like you're using non-tangible tokens as a way to exchange goods and services to the sponsor companies, and also expanding on a in-game universe that's can also be connectivity.
That's right. So you'll make friends and enemies in the game by willing to trade or sell stuff to them, and our sponsors will like it because you're taking stuff out of the game, and it's you slew the dragon, and to complete your quest and level up, take this QR code and get it redeemed at a Subway for buy one get one 6-inch sub, right? And then it literally is taking you to the Subway to do that. And if you don't like that token, you can sell it to someone else, right? You could trade it with somebody else as part of that, because maybe you don't like Subway, and you want to spend your stuff at Olive Garden or whatever, like that kind of stuff. You can find people, and you can find a marketplace where those things will always be exchanged, but your character will have the chance to earn them and redeem them in the real world, as well as using them in the augmented or virtual reality world.
What is one aspect of the Realm of Warminster that you find for your own spin? It wasn't based on anything else. Your own version.
Yeah, so I created, I think, first of all, it's a great question. I fell in love with the concept of prophecy and divination, and the ability for some folks to do that, back from Nostradamus, who's probably the most famous, to other fortune tellers like Edgar Cayce I mentioned earlier. And the idea to make that something that you could worship. And we've seen that in cultures around the world, where people sometimes read bones, or they'll cut open and look at entrails of animals and stuff like that to predict the future, or a certain swallow flew by something, and as a result, they can predict something that's going to happen. Well, I wanted to take that and put that on steroids. And what I made a god known as Avid, which is a sexless god, a god that's not man nor woman, because it is the god of knowledge. And so it imparts knowledge in a variety of different ways. Its followers come in 4 different forms. The first is the deacons of the divine protectorate of Avid, and they're there as basically teachers, right? They are there to be scholars. They are teaching knowledge and spreading the word of their god, which is knowledge, by teaching people, right? And they travel around, and that's what they do. Second one is the disciples of the Watch, and they're there to protect. They're kind of the Jesuits of this, to use a real life term. They are these highly trained scholars that also are embedded in politics, and they go out and they work alongside kings and queens and emperors and empresses around the realm, in the hopes of giving them advice and being there for political understanding and military understanding in some cases, and or understandings of what the gods are trying to say. The third one was the Knights of the Maelstrom, and the Knights are the military arm, so they're like the Templars of the Divine Protectorate of Avid, and they're there to protect not just the libraries and the knowledge of the realm, but also their scholars that go around that are proselytizing knowledge, almost like a scientific community in many respects. And the last part, and the most important part, are the keepers of the forbidden. And the keepers are those that are God touched. They have the ability to see the future, and that comes directly from their god, this Aerud, this god of knowledge, who imparts it to them in a variety of different ways. And sometimes they're looking into a mirror or a pool of water. And in the main character's case, Damus, he gets his visions when he sleeps. But the problem is his visions are violent, and they come to him and they affect him physically. And I looked at that as a way of saying, you know what, that's a god touching you. And if a god touched you, you're weaker than that god, and it's going to affect you. So he would lose sleep. He would not eat. He would become sick. He would be weakened when that happened because he was touched by something that had a greater essence, a life force than he, and he didn't know how to control it, in the beginning. And so, for him in the beginning, it's violent, and these dreams come to him as nightmares. And as he grows as a character, he learns how to interpret that and use that knowledge. And so it's not as frightening later. Some of the things he divines might be frightening, but he matures and understands that, hey, I can master this, and Aerud's not trying to hurt me, and I don't need to look at it and say that you're killing me and oh, woe is me. It's more like, hey, you're blessing me with this knowledge that I'm supposed to turn into something. But the keepers are the holiest of the holy, and all three of the other, the deacons, the disciples, and the knights all protect the keepers. They kind of run it. They're sort of like the cardinals using a Catholic church, where they're the high end, group. So anything they say goes, and they go out and they're kind of like, I would describe them as maesters, that you would find in Game of Thrones, where they are wise, learned people that go and advise kingdoms of what to do, not on the political side, but they're seeing things come down the road. Are there curses or aspects of challenges that they need to overcome in quests and things, and they're there to offer Aerud's guidance so that the realm stays in balance. And oftentimes they come in the form of ill omen, which is how the story starts. Damus sees the return of the fallen keeper, one of his own, that this curse was brought onto him as a result of a deed that he had done and used the powers that his god had given into him in a way that was forbidden. And as a result, he's cursed, and after a 20-year period, he's now coming back to take his revenge. And Damus is the last keeper, which is the name of the first book. He's the last keeper that has the Erudian sight that will allow him to see the return of Great Taurus and know how to combat him.
Oh, okay. So is Damus the main character, or just one of the characters you have?
He's one of the three main characters in the novel. When you write epic fantasy, you typically write with multi-point of view characters. And so I've chosen really three characters that are what I would describe as the main characters. Damus Alaric is at the heart of the story. It's his story that motivates everything else. But there's a love interest that makes up the other story. It's like a fantasy romance between Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer and Princess Adeline Elspeth. And Adeline is a Vermilion elf. She is the highest of all the races of all the elves. And little old Ritter is something I call a Trollborn, which is an elf that's of mixed blood. He's half human and half elven, and therefore he's looked down upon by both cultures because he's not human, he's not Raven Elven, he's Trollborn, he's something in the middle. And she leaves the alabaster gates of Eldwald, her home, for the first time, and goes into what I describe as the Coventry, which is the rest of the realm. And everyone else looks at them as very angelic, and they're almost like demigods in that sense. But she starts to fall in love with Ritter, not based on who he is, but the deeds that he does, like the true person. And he struggles because he's falling for her, for the deeds and her valor, but he also recognizes the fact that he's way beneath her, and their relationship would cause all sorts of consternation everywhere around the realm. And so he fights his own love for her by trying to stay away, but he can't fight it. And she tries to fight all the principles she's been ingrained in and hidden behind this wall for all these years about, we are the Vermilion elves and we're better than everyone else. And then she comes out and falls in love with the lowest of the low, this Trollborn, border knight who, is despised by everybody except for his own people, and she figures that out early on because of his valor, because of his courage, and because of his character. And as a result, they fall in love throughout the course of the stories, and a little bit of danger and a little bit of adventure it kind of helps move that story along too. But between Daemis, Ritter, and Adeline, they're the three main characters that you see in the majority of the story through their eyes. There are other characters you see through because of, tactical reasons, but, for the most part, those are the three main characters in the novels.
Oh, okay. So, what is one aspect of the book that you really like that's not in the book?
So, I hate to say it, but in the book, you control everything, right? So I control the outcome of gameplay. And in the game, I don't, right? So my gameplay, I know what the story's doing. I know how all these pieces intersect and they make a good tale. In the game, I lose that control entirely. So you could make up a character who hunts down Ritter and kills him. And takes his magical bow or someone that you stop Daemis because you're make a character that is of the Morbog, or someone that's a follower of the Fallen Keeper, and you can play on the bad guys team too, and it bothers me, but I also think the chaos of it is a lot of fun. So you could choose your shot. You could choose neutrality. You could choose the side of the heroes. You could choose the side of the villains. You could walk your own path and do none of it. And just have fun creating your own stronghold and leveling up and creating your own religion and anything you want to do. It's going to be available to you. And I don't like the fact that I can't control that part of it. But that's what makes the game fun. And it's a different medium than my books. My books are defined, where this game is not defined. And I think a lot of people are going to like that aspect of it.
So you can actually play the game and become a really good player?
Hell yeah. I've been playing games since I was 10. That's not going to change, man. And of course I'm going to play my own game. I mean, and I honestly already have an idea for my own avatar. I'm not going to share that here, but, ultimately, I think that I'll give you a hint. You might be able to find me as the chronicler of the realm, a goodly sage. If you're a fan of the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoons from back in the 80s, it might be the DM that wanders around and does some nice things for you, or wags his finger and punishes you if you do the wrong things and stuff like that. But I can help change outcomes. I'll be able to do some things and play it that way, or I'll also be able to create my own character that I have no control over, that can die in my own realm, which would be fun.
So, is there an aspect of the game when you log off that player is still playable, or is it only playable when you're online?
Right now, it's going to be only playable when it's online. That may change down the road, but right now, you're not going to be able to find that character if they're not in the Meldiverse, right? So they have to plug in to be available to play, and that might be 2 or 3 generations down the road where we can do something like that. But it would be the game taking over your avatar and running it for you while you're not playing. And I know there's some of that where you can pay in certain games to level up or max out your characters. We're going to have some of that, but it's going to be different. I don't want to give away too much, but when you create your characters, there's going to be some limitations on that. So it makes it fun. So you have to earn it. You have to gameplay it. You can't just buy it. And expedite the growth of your character. There'll be some. We'll allow some, because I think it's commonplace now, but not everywhere. You're gonna have to do it on your own. You're not gonna get the jump from level 1 to 20 without earning a little bit of that by gameplay.
Okay. And with these different aspects, would it be like a multiplayer raids or something like that?
Yeah, so you're going to put on your headset if you want, or you can, right now you could do a lot of things, and your character will be, POV, it's going to be single point of view through your eyes, but you'll be able to meet, if you have your friends and you all create your characters, you'll be able to meet in certain towns and or on certain quests and play alongside one another like a Dungeons and Dragons party, or playing Fortnite, right? It's not much different, in that respect. So yes, those kind of things will exist, and you'll be able to, but you'll be playing single point of view and so will everybody else.
When is the release of the game supposed to be?
It's supposed to be fourth quarter of this year. I don't have a date yet, but I'll probably know here sometime around May.
Okay. So the early development of the game, what was it like to translate that from the book to the game?
It was tough because I'm giving away control of my baby, right? So to be honest, when you give away control of something you've created, it's almost like, this is my art. Please don't screw it up. I'm trusting you not to screw it up. And so you have to have faith in, folks that really know their medium. And I had to come to their grips with the reality that not everything is going to go the same way it goes in my books, but I'm creating new followers and people that might buy my books because they're now playing the game and they want to read what really happened in the books. And if they do read what happened in the books, or they meet the characters that are in the books in the game, which is part of it, not the entirety of it, but part of it, by meeting them, you'll be able to get stuff that you wouldn't be able to get in any other way, right? So it's helpful to have read the books. You'll understand the realm better. There'll be hints that are left in there. And of course, some of the challenges you're going to have to overcome are going to be based on solutions that are only found in the novels. So you'll meet some of those characters, and there'll be some quests that are designed that if you've read the novels, you might get a sneak peek on how to beat the game, or how to find something you might not have been able to find on a quest without reading the books.
Okay. And in the Realm of Warminster, how many books is there?
There's 4 currently. The 3 are out. The 4th one comes out. It's called Echoes of Ghostwood, and Echoes of Ghostwood comes out April of this year. So in 2 months, that will be available, and that will complete the entirety of the first 4 books. It's a quadrilogy. It's a series, and that'll be done. And then later on in the summer, we're going to have we're going to have a few spin-offs, smaller novellas about some of the more popular characters in the novels. So the assassin in the books, ingeniously, he's like my Boba Fett. People love to hate him, and he'll be the first book, called The Black Rose, will come out later in the summer, and then Ritter's book, his own personal backstory, his origin story, called Trollborn, will come out in the fall, and then right around the holidays, Adelin's story will come out. I'm still writing that, so I can't even give you a hint as to what the title's going to be, because I don't know what it's going to be. We're not there yet, but the other 2 are in editing right now, and so I kind of know where they're going. So you'll be able to find the Black Rose, which is the nickname for ingeniously, and the Trollborn, which is obviously Ritter's backstory, later this year after book 4 comes out.
Is all 4 books incorporated into the game, or is there only a custom version of the book?
Oh no, all 4 books. And the reason being is, it's a long epic fantasy series, right? So to play along, I've got to give you to go from level 1 to level 50, you've got to have a lot more than just 1 book's worth of plot lines in it. So there's things in there. There's also things that you can go to places that I just mentioned in the book that I've never even described, but you can go and explore later down the road. So when I was sitting there doing the storyboarding, and they would ask me about a place on the opposite side of the realm where the main characters had never been, I described to them what was there, and they created gameplay around that. So if you wanted to go there, and you took a boat to get there, or you took a horse to get there, you used magic to get there, even though you don't see it in the first 4 novels, it's already built into the game, and you'll be able to play and do quests in those different parts of the realm as part of that. And I thought that was important because, hey, if you've got independence and free will and you don't want to be playing the same game that you read, but you want to go somewhere else in the realm and explore it, that needed to be available to a player, and it will be.
Is there anything you want anyone to take from your journey from writing to the books to the game that you really want them to know?
Yeah, so, I'm a nerd just like everybody that's watching this show, right? And I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for 20 years. Love it, and a lot of the stories that came from my role-playing have been embedded into this game. And as a gamer, you'll see aspects of that really, speak to you. You'll see the combat systems and the way it moves. It feels like you're playing a D&D game. it reads that way. You're there in the scene, and I want to put you on the ground. It's not, I don't helicopter it and show you from above. I put you in through the eyes of every character, and some people that don't survive, you see their death scenes through their eyes and things like that, in the same way you would see it in your character for D&D. And I thought that was important because I think a lot of D&D players read my kind of stuff, and if they know that my stuff is related to it, even though it's separate of it, they'll enjoy it, and they'll see and find and feel some familiarity to it.
Oh, okay. So to wrap this up, what is one thing you just want as a general message?
Yeah, so the one thing I would say is if you haven't had a chance to read my stuff, it's pretty easy to find, jvhilliard.com. I'm available, and if you need to get in touch with me, you have any questions or ideas or thoughts, or you have read my stuff and you want to touch base with me, joe@jvhilliard.com is my email address. You can also direct message me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I'm at JV Hilliard Books or JV Hilliard. Pretty easy to find on everything. I've got a YouTube channel called The Realm. I've got a blog talk radio show called The Realm, and I interview other creatives. And if you want to be part of that interview, let me know. Happy to have you on. Just touch base with me by emailing me or reaching out on one of those platforms.
All right. Well, you heard it from JV himself. Well, you can find him, the creator of the Realm of Warminster. This concludes our MCMA's episode on AR, the Realm of Warminster. So thank you so much for being here, and it was a blast having you.
Thank you, my friend. It was great being on. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Elon.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.